Hey, it's Friday. Welcome to this edition of Homegrown, where Lynn is going to share her vast amounts of gardening knowledge with us. Hey, Lynn, how are you?
I'm good. I'm not so sure about the vast amounts. You know, I've discovered, I used to think I was pretty clever back in the day. And I've discovered now the more that I learn, the more I realize how much I need to learn.
Oh,
And
well, the more we don't know, but no. Come on, gardening doesn't change that much. They come out with newfangled things, but gardening in itself hasn't changed in forever.
no, I think they're learning more about the soil biology. That part of
Mhm.
it is really new. And I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And
How
uh,
how much knowledge on mushrooms do you have?
limited.
Oh, that would be a fun topic to dig into at some point, is just
Mhm.
let's talk about mushrooms. I think we can probably find somebody. It's just such a
In fact, I have a
fascinating.
friend who's a mycologist, I
Uh-huh.
believe it is, and let me discuss with him, and I bet he would love to be on here. And when you throw a topic like that out to me, then I will go study and learn it.
Yeah.
And something that I've been noticing a lot, because I'm home and I'm not going out, I'm doing something I never thought I would do, and that's online shopping. Um, and I'm discovering in my gardener supply, gardening world online shopping, there are all of these mycelium kits for growing your own mushrooms. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, it's pretty
something,
fascinating.
and it's very up and coming right now. I
Yeah.
think because this
When
gardening
before
thing took off.
before I moved up here, I belonged to a garden club in Oakdale, and we had a speaker that came in that was one of the guys that he makes these kits. This is his business is making the kits and selling them and whatnot.
Right?
But one of his early partners was, and I don't know, I can't remember his name, but was the gentleman who has basically um, been the expert on fungus and mushrooms and invented, I wouldn't even say invented, he just discovered that you can use spores as a form of pesticide. So
Oh, really?
you spray these spores, so like maybe in like an ant colony or something,
Right.
and what happens is the spores attach to the ants, and the ants become their host, and it obviously kills the ants, but the ants take it back to the nest, and you have these mushrooms or these things growing out of these ants. It's just fascinating stuff. And then
Wow.
he shared with us how they took garbage piles, and we're talking some nasty garbage piles, like waste that is really hard to get rid of, and they injected them with mushroom spores, and basically the mushrooms eat the garbage, eat those
Wow.
that pile of waste.
Yeah.
And it was just like I said, it's just fascinating.
Wow, I'm going to have to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Well, the world of myceliums is just amazing. I know there's one in Oregon that's like, what, 5 miles long or something like that,
Insane.
underground. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a topic I'd love.
the fungus is gonna save us all. So, but today, what are we gonna talk about today?
Well, I think because the weather's changing, I want to talk a little bit about watering versus the weather, a little bit on fertilizer, dry and liquid. I want to talk about why are my plants, I'm getting these questions. Why are my plants wilting in the middle of the day? And Chris, who was on earlier, suggested that we talk about pruning for more blooms, deadheading, pinching, all
Mhm.
of that sort of stuff. And I want to talk about what the cold weather did if we have time. So a lot of stuff.
Right. There's never a shortage of stuff to talk about.
Oh, no, no, no. You know what I do? I get people will contact me and ask me questions a lot. I
Mhm.
do a lot of online consulting, and that's usually where I pull these ideas from.
Right. Right.
Uh, yeah, I get a lot of emails and I get a lot of messenger and all, texts and all that sort of stuff. So
Well,
I enjoy that.
before we get into that, can I ask you, how is your garden doing?
My garden is finally taking off. It's finally taking off. Many of the questions that I've gotten were, oh my gosh, everything is just sitting there. Nothing is happening. Well, it's been cold at night.
Yeah, yeah.
So nothing's going to happen when you plant warm season vegetables and temperatures drop at night down into 45. Anything below 55, they're just going to sit there. They
Yeah,
almost start going into dormancy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So my
it's
garden
probably
was,
going to feel like all of a sudden it just explodes.
oh, I swear my okra grows a foot a day.
Yeah. We didn't plant any okra this year. All of the squash that we planted, the zucchini and squash, is all doing well. We've got some little ones like that,
Yeah.
and obviously the tomatoes and the kale, all the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Coming along. The cabbage and the broccoli looked a little sad there for a while, but
They're going to look even sadder with this heat.
yeah, I know it's like they
They're going to
didn't.
say bye-bye.
Yeah, I think I just don't. I don't think we planted at the right time. We just
Yeah.
missed it. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's talk about whatever you want to talk about first.
Let's talk about watering. Rick, in a couple of episodes ago, asked a little bit about watering, and I realized I didn't really address watering. And now that the weather has gotten warmer, I mean, how about hot? And you're going to need to water more. But a lot of people think if they just kind of sprinkle the top of the soil, that's going to do it. And that water needs to go directly on around the base of the plant. And overhead watering is a real no-no, except if you're in the hot country and you're growing artichokes, they benefit from overhead watering.
Oh, really?
But yeah, because they're used to that coastal marine layer. That's where they were, originally by the ocean is where they're from. But you want to water deeply and infrequently. Most people will sprinkle a little bit every day. Well, what you're doing is encouraging those roots to grow right along in the first top 4 inches of the soil. Well, when we have a day that's going to spike out next week, 98 degrees, it cooks that top layer of soil and you're cooking your roots. So if you water deeply, infrequently, and I water my tomatoes maybe every 5 days, I actually let them tell me when I see those little baby leaves up on top just starting to wilt a little bit, and not in the middle of the day, but like in the evening. I water late afternoon. And I see those, I'm like, okay, you need water. And then I'll give them more water.
Interesting. Okay.
But deeply.
I know
Deeply.
I know that watering is probably the number one issue with anybody starting out with gardening, because we love our plants too much and we give them, we like I said, water them every day or whatever. So you're like a little dry, we'll give you some water. And I mean, we all make those mistakes. And I mean, today, I still make those mistakes sometimes. It's like, oh, you need a little water. So it's like the number one mistake we can make as gardeners. But
I think so too.
Once you understand why you do it that way, then it's like, okay. And I hadn't thought about just waiting until the leaves tell me it's time to water.
They'll just start to, which is going to lead me to talk about transpiration, but I want to stay on watering a little bit longer. So I kind of do this visualization thing. I meditate, so it's kind of easy for me to visualize. I kind of visualize the water going down. Now, a lot of people use a drip or, an automated irrigation system. Don't think because you have an automated irrigation system on a timer that you can just ignore it.
Right.
If you're watering now like you were watering 2 weeks ago during that cold period, you need to amp up the water.
Got it.
Okay? Infrequently, very, very, very deep. And check those systems constantly. I've seen more people lose hedges and trees because they thought the system was okay.
Right.
They might have, maybe they're on NID and they got some, something in it, and the filter didn't catch it. So check them constantly, but I prefer hand watering. It's my Zen thing to do. I love to get out and watch the birds. I was telling you earlier about the baby wrens that have hatched and watching mom and dad feeding them and all that. To me, it's just part of what's going on. And it also gives you more opportunity to keep an eye on what is going on. Have you ever not checked your garden for 3 days and you've gone out and half of it's gone?
Exactly. Like, when did that happen? Yeah. And I know when we built our front yard garden, we did put in an automated system mostly because we work full time, we
Mhm.
travel, and just having that peace of mind to know that at
Right,
least the plants are going to get something.
right.
And then we augment it with our hand watering.
Mhm,
Um, and you're right, hand watering, that's the Zen time. That's the time
mhm.
to be able to go out and see the garden. But when you work, it does make it really hard to be able
It
to
does. It does.
to
It does.
have a life, travel, do all those things, and have a garden at the same time.
Have a life. That's interesting. I guess this is my life these days. Gardening is my solace during
Yeah.
these crazy times we're going through.
But
So
we're
I guess,
going into we're going into a time that more and more people are looking at gardening than more than just a hobby. Either it's to feed their own family or to grow food to make an income.
mhm,
So people
mhm.
are looking at it differently now.
I belong to a group on Facebook. Well, two gardening, well, more than two gardening groups on Facebook, but one is called Northern California Backyard Gardeners.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting how many, I think she's up to like 600 just last week that joined this group. Yeah, and she's just kind of overwhelmed right now. And I got a message from her the other day asking if I could be a monitor, and I can't. I just can't devote that kind of time to it. I don't want to spend that much time on the computer anyway. I want to be out in my garden, right? But yeah, there's just all kinds of enthusiasm. The nurseries around here, the garden centers, are having difficulty keeping up with their businesses because it's just the demand is so hot and the supply is so limited right now
Hmm.
because they've had to shut down some of these nurseries. And it's just a really interesting time, I think, all around. But to think that gardening would become such a phenomenon, everybody wants to garden now.
It's
Yeah,
wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and I just hope that people don't abandon it once they don't feel like they have to do it anymore,
right,
because
right,
it's such a rewarding thing. It's a frustrating. We talked about that. It's very, very frustrating,
right.
but it's such a rewarding thing when it does work out and you eat those tomatoes and you eat those.
Oh,
I mean, whatever it is that you
yum.
grow, it's nothing like being able to go out in your yard and walk around and pick things right off the vine and just eat them.
I
And
had my
you don't have
first.
to worry about washing them. You don't have, I mean, you know what you're doing. Uh,
Yeah,
it's just such a rewarding thing. But it is time consuming. It can be very
it
time
is.
consuming.
It is.
Um,
My biggest concern with people is that they start too large.
yeah,
You don't want to do that. You want to start very, very small, and that way your failures
don't
might
feel
not
so
be
big.
as many. Yeah,
Boy, I know
that's,
that feeling.
yeah, me too. I call
Yeah.
it back to the drawing board.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But don't give up. Every year it gets better. So,
Yeah, every year it
let
does.
me ask you a couple of questions that came on in,
Okay.
and then you can see how they can fit into what you want to talk about. So
Okay.
the first question that came in was, when was the best time to water a garden?
I've always said if you talk to 10 different gardeners, you're going to get 10 different ideas. Uh, Early morning, but that's a good question. Early morning or late afternoon.
So
I
never in the middle of the day.
never in the middle of the day. From the peak period of about 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, the water is just being wasted because the evaporation just,
Mhm.
the heat of the soil, the heat of the sun just sucks it up.
Right.
And in fact, I can be such a busybody that I've become to know the highway maintenance people because their sprinklers were coming on at 1 o'clock one afternoon when it was 99 degrees out. And I got to know the gentleman really well. He's a really nice guy.
And I bet you they appreciate it in the long run. Um,
Well, actually, I've spoken to the group numerous times.
nice. What
They have me
about
put on workshops. Yeah.
I've heard the old myth that you shouldn't water like early morning hours, 2 a.m. Um,
No, not necessarily. In fact, that's the best time to water your lawn if you still have a lawn. Um,
Shame on them.
Shame on you. Why do you want a lawn? It's a Midwestern thing. It's over from the old days. Um, But no, if you're out at 2 o'clock in the morning and you don't mind wandering around between the rats and the possums and the raccoons and, the mountain lion or the bear or whatever, I think why not? I usually water late afternoon. That's my favorite time in the garden, sundown. I love it out at that time of the night. But just don't water during the heat of the day.
Right, right. And then the other question was, raised beds seem to dry out really, really fast. And what can I do to help prevent that?
Mulch, 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 mulch. Yeah, if you look at a raised bed, it's got 4 sides that are being exposed to the heat as opposed to the soil in the ground. So I think heavily mulching really, really helps with that, keeping the soil temperature consistent. It helps keep the moisture in the soil. And a mulch should be 3 inches. I use rice straw, 3 to 4 inches. And you don't want it around the stem of the plant. You want to pull it away. I call that, if you do that, that's called the B&B effect in my brain, because you're giving those little critters munching things to munch on for their little breakfast and a little bed for them to sleep in at night.
Oh, the B&B, got it. Yeah.
The B&B, yeah.
We're
So
a huge
pull that up, out about 2 or 3 inches away from the stem.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, we're a huge fan of rice straw. I think I may have discovered it from you years and years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it maybe some on a post or something somewhere, and straw is straw. I didn't know the difference, and then it's like, yep, less weeds. Every now and then we get a weed, but not very often.
Not very often, especially if you get it really deep. Like
yeah,
that.
We pack it really thick. And then the other, let's see, 2 more questions. The leaves on my squash plants are turning yellow. Can you tell me why that's happening? And actually, I've seen lots of posts this week with lots of different plants with the leaves turning yellow.
Okay, that's that's all part of what I was going to talk about. Cold weather versus the warm season veggies.
Okay.
That's typically, at this time of the season, it's typically a result of cool nights. The plant can't pump the nitrogen out through its vascular system is just kind of, it's not doing anything. So it's not pumping nitrogen out to the leaves, and that causes them to turn yellow. Typically what will happen, they can expect to see little tiny black dots on those leaves because the leaf is just not able to do anything. The plant is not able to do anything for that leaf. Now next week, if you're seeing yellowing leaves, and we've had this stretch of warm weather, then it's probably a lack of nitrogen or overwatering. Overwatering flushes the nutrients out of the soil, and the plant can't get to the nutrients that are in the soil because there's so much water around.
Got it.
So, yeah.
So really up to just about this point, if they're having a yellowing issue, they can pretty much contribute that to the cold weather.
The cold weather.
But as we move forward, and it still persists, you're saying either overwatering
or lack of nitrogen.
Or lack of nitrogen.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. In fact, that was a question I had from a client just this week about her plants where some of the leaves were turning yellow. Now, if it's as the plant matures, the older leaves are going to die. They're going to start looking kind of crispy on the edges and that. I sometimes leave those because they will shade maybe the main stem of like one of my watermelons or one of my pumpkins or squash. But if they're really not doing anything, then just get rid of them. Just cut them off.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last question was, I have one tomato plant that's getting the same amount of water as everything else, but it looks like it's dying.
Oh boy, that's an anybody's guess question on that one. She might try watering it less. It may be a variety that doesn't like a lot of water. It may be a variety that prefers cooler temperatures. I don't know if this is happening right now, It might be a variety that prefers warmer temperatures. At this season of the gardening game, you know, we've just gone through that cold weather and now we're going into this heat. There's a lot of fluctuation there and these plants really suffer from it.
Yeah, and it doesn't take much to
No.
throw the balance off. It's kind of like raising kids. You know, you can raise 3 kids the same way. You think you're doing the same thing, but no.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might get one with brown leaves.
You might get one with brown leaves. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah,
Oh
kids,
gosh, yeah, watering a garden. Oh my gosh, it's so incredibly hard. But once you figure it out, then it's like
figure
it
it
wasn't
out.
that hard. It wasn't that
Yeah.
hard, but it's one of
Yeah.
those things it's a hard thing to learn
Yeah.
because it to me it feels like it's something that you have to learn over time,
You do.
and sometimes correcting those mistakes, it's too late.
Yeah, and the thing about it, you really need to study the plant that you're watering. I mean, it's just not like a post in the ground. It has a personality, so to say.
Yeah.
Some of them require a lot of water. Some of them don't like water at all.
Mhm.
I'm growing a stilby, and a stilby like a really, really wet soil. A stilby is that kind of has a poofy big flower on it. It gets real tall.
Mhm.
And it has that real poofy, and they come in pinks and whites, and there's kind of a scarlety one. Well, because where I wanted it here in the human rearranging nature, I've learned that if you line the hole with heavy duty plastic, put the soil back in that plastic and then plant into that plastic creates sort of a catch basin and keeps the moisture in that area.
What a clever idea.
It's, you know, imitation is this most sincere
I
form
wonder-
of flattery.
I wonder how that would work with, I like trying new things, as you can tell. I wonder
too.
how that would work for those plants that do require a lot of water, like melons, for example. If you were to take say a raised bed and do some kind of lining before you put the soil in to kind of help retain some of that water in there.
Why not? Why not?
You know, maybe put a few holes, but not really a ton. I wonder how that would work, because that's usually the problem when you plant a bunch of different stuff.
You
It's
know,
like,
I'll just, you know what? I'm going to do that because I've got one more watermelon I want to stick in the ground. I'll do that. I'll try that.
how
It's
big are the
reminding-
roots? How big are the
Yeah.
roots on a watermelon plant? Do they go deep?
Yeah, nothing goes really deep. Not even a tree. A tree doesn't go more than about 2 feet
So
deep.
does a watermelon root more spread, or does it go deep?
Yeah, they spread out. They
So
spread
you
out.
could that's something you could probably easily
Yeah.
do in a container or something.
Yeah, it's all of this conversation is making me think of Oyas. Do you know what an Oya is?
Mm-mm.
They use them in the Southwest, and we should start using them here. They make clay jugs that are porous,
Hmm.
and they come in, oh my gosh, I've seen them this big. I've seen them, 20 gallon. But typically they're about a gallon, and there's a little spout that comes up out of the soil with a little lid on it. You plant that next to where you've planted the plant,
Hmm.
fill it with water, and it just seeps out as the soil dries up.
Nice. It's like
Yeah.
it's like an IV system.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, all this talk about water, I want to talk about transpiration
Okay, go for it.
because it kind of, it all has to do with this watering thing. How many times, I can't even tell you how many times I've had people say to me, I think my squash is dying. Squash are real susceptible to this. Why is that? Well, the leaves just get all wilty. What time of the day do your leaves get all wilty? Oh, I don't know, noon, 1 o'clock. That's called transpiration. So you go out and you water it and you're compounding the situation because that water you put on that plant at say 1 o'clock, that plant is not going to start uptaking that water till 6 o'clock, at which point the transpiration cycle will be over with because that's caused by the plant losing all of its moisture through its little stomata. Those are the little mouth-like things on the bottom. And it just kind of does this to reduce the amount of exposure to the sun. So when you see your plant drooping I can hear my wren. It's singing to the baby. When you see your plant drooping, ignore it. If you look at it again at 6 o'clock when the intense sun is not on it and it's still drooping, then you need to water it. But if you look at it at 6 o'clock and it's perked back up again, that's mean that water that's in the stems in the vascular system can keep up with the demands on that leaf. Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense, actually. Now, if you know you're going to have a really hot day, would it help prevent the wilting if you go out and water in the morning?
Probably. But what will
But
help
then you have the problem of overwatering.
then you have the problem of overwatering, right? I made notes because this is such a biology kind of thing to do. Plants lose more than 90% of their water through transpiration. So on these really, really hot days, you need to water more and more deeply.
And prior to the heat of the day.
Yeah, prior to the heat of the day. Or like last night, I watered really, really deeply until the mosquitoes drove me in. And because I knew today was going to be hot, and I know these plants are fairly newly planted. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
They're fairly newly planted. So their roots are pretty shallow, even though I've mulched them. So I watered real heavily last night for my babies because I know today's going to be really rough on them and the rest of them. Right. And two things that help it, that help fight against transpiration, is deep watering several times a week. Peppers do not like a lot of water. Watermelon like a lot of water. You need to know what these plants want, okay? And mulching keeps the roots cooler and keeps the moisture in the ground, because if you think about it, a big thick mulch is shading, making shade on that soil. So those two things will help prevent it. I've got a couple of plants in pots that there's nothing you can do about it in a pot.
Right.
You know, I'll just watch them tonight, and if they're still wilty when I go out at 7, then I'll hit them with some water until it's running through it, right? Yeah, that's transpiration.
Great.
Y'all learned a big word today.
That's some good information right there.
Thank you very much. I find it fascinating. Geek that I have become. Maybe
well, you know what? If we can turn more people into geeks, that's great.
You got to be a good geek about something.
You do, and you know, people think, oh, well, gardening's so easy. Look at, you know, look at fields and fields of, yeah, but they're growing the same vegetable. That's all. The only thing they have to worry about.
Yeah.
Home gardening is way harder.
Home gardening is completely different. You know, I garden in the soil and I garden in pots. Completely different.
Yeah.
So, and when I rotate it, it's funny because the okra will go in one year where the tomatoes were, and it's just completely different. Okay, my okra is now in these pots, and the pots, granted, are like 50, 60 gallon pots.
Right.
So they're pretty big, but in watering in those, I have to use the stick to go down to see how far the water has gone down.
Right.
So, because usually I put the stick down in and I pull it out and it's muddy on the bottom. And I'm like, whoop, okay, you're not getting any more water.
Yeah.
So it's really just, that's why I say start small and really be intensely involved with those few plants that you have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what else you got for us?
Talking about pruning and deadheading and pinching back.
Okay.
How about that?
That sounds like a mouthful there.
Little. I wrote it down. Pinching back, deadheading, and pruning. Okay,
sounds
pinching
like a
back
band.
is, pardon me?
Sounds like a band.
A punk band.
Yeah.
Okay, I even have samples. I brought something from my garden.
Ooh.
And I have to tell you, this is a Verbena bonarensis. And they get about 5 feet tall with these cute little purple blossoms on them. Do not plant this unless you have ample room for it to go crazy. This plant is actually growing between the bricks in my walkway.
Oh, nice.
I did not plant it. Thank you, birds. I guess that's where it came from. But anyway, I want to talk about pinching back. These things get so tall and they're just so leggy and they fall all over the place. And if you pinch back, can you see any detail here?
I can, yeah.
These are nodes. These little
Uh-huh.
things are nodes, and you can see them even up here,
Yep.
nodes. Okay, this is a great example right here. Do you see that?
Yep.
That's what happens with that. You haven't even pinched back. So if you're wanting to pinch this thing back, pinching back will make it, well, or pruning will make it bushier and not so long and leggy, and will
Uh-huh.
also give you more blooms because there's going to be a bloom coming off of every one of these.
Okay.
So if I were going to cut this back, let's say it's planted, if I were going to cut this back, I would cut it back clear to here. You can already see a branch starting to come up here. So I'd cut that back. And me, if it were something other than something like this, I'd stick it in soil and try to root it again. But I need more plants, right? So every time you cut this back, or let's say I wanted it to be a little taller, but this is going to be an erroneous thing to do, because if you were to cut this back, this is going to get real bushy, and you still got all of
Yeah.
this. Does that understand?
Yep.
So you can count a plant on, most plants grow about a foot. So if you want this bushier, you want to cut it back really, really low.
Okay.
Okay? Does that make sense?
And you're just going to cut the stem right off?
I'm going to just cut the stem. Let me get my new snippers. I bought me a present. I love them. They're bonsai. I'm starting to do bonsai. Yeah, so if I wanted to cut it off here,
Uh-huh.
there you have it. Just like that. Okay? And this is going to
So that won't grow anymore at the stem above. It'll grow below.
It'll grow here. See this right here? If I wanted this even bushier, I would cut this, and two of them will come out here.
Yeah.
See how there's two came out of there?
Yep.
So every place you cut in that node, two branches will come out. Now the Deadheading, and that is not a band. Actually, that's where they got their name. The Deadheads, and I was one for many years. Old hippie that I am. Deadheading is simply after the plant has spent its bloom and is starting to form seeds, you want to deadhead it. You want to pinch it back, except actually it should be gone right there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. A plant's sole purpose in life is to procreate. And every time I say that, I think of my girlfriend with 12 children. But yeah, same husband.
Wow.
A plant, all it wants to do is grow, blossom, and set seed. And if you don't stop that process, it's not going to bloom again.
Right.
Now, some plants will not rebloom. I'm thinking of lilies and
right, tulips. Yeah.
Yeah, they will not bloom. But most perennials, if you deadhead them, you're going to get more blooms. If it is just busy sending out all of its energy into putting seeds out, it's not going to take any bloom time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So would roses fall in that category?
Again, you have to study the plant. Some are ever-blooming roses, will bloom like all summer long.
Uh-huh.
I have a climber called Paul Scarlet that's just the most stunning rose you've ever seen. It just puts out this huge burst, and right now it's like blah. Has one bloom on it.
Well, that was very informative.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So we talked about the cold weather versus warm season veggies.
Yeah.
I'll reiterate again, anytime we drop below 55 degrees at night, these plants just shut down.
Yeah. And we're still not out of the woods. I know up here we've had snow in July. So, I mean, we always think, nah, it's not going to snow. But
well, you know, June, that first week in June, it's always hail. I'm going around my garden looking at some of my evergreen plants, and the leaves are all tattered, and you know, you can just see where the hail, as tiny as it was still just peppering them. And I'm, oh my gosh, I wish I could have covered them, but I have too much stuff to cover.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're seeing those little spots all over your leaves of stuff, and it's been sitting out where it could get the hail on it, that's what caused that.
Okay. Got it. Now,
alrighty then.
Now, what should we be doing in our greenhouses right now? Should we be starting any seeds for? No,
Greenhouses are too hot right now for any seeds you'd want to plant in the
we can turn
fall.
them into saunas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my greenhouse is almost empty. Just a few things that I just haven't bothered to sit out yet. And I always keep some cactus in there that I keep for the bloom because they're kind of ugly until they bloom. But greenhouses this time of the year up here are not places I want to be.
Okay. I know. Right now, Jen's got she keeps her windows open, so she's got some things in there that she hasn't quite put out yet, but the windows are open all the time. So,
Yeah, yeah. My windows are automatic. I lucked into this beautiful greenhouse, and I thank my lucky stars for it. But
so right now, we shouldn't be planting anything. We shouldn't be starting seeds.
finishing up planting, I'm finishing up planting right now. I had a real weed problem this year, and I haven't been able to get all the areas cleaned out. So I'm potting up, plants, and oh my gosh, it's just a nightmare right now trying to get it all done.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then, so what is the next big deadline to do anything? So let's say we want to do a fall garden.
Okay, you want 6 to 8 weeks is usually what they say. You kind of think about before you want to plant, 6 to 8 weeks.
I can barely remember next week. I can barely function to tomorrow.
So I will probably start seeds August.
So around August, we should start be thinking about what fall plants we're going to be putting.
Right, and I can plant then mid-September is usually a pretty good time. Sometimes I'll jump it a little bit if I've got a plant that's going to make me some shade. I can plant something under it. But warm season veggies do not like this heat, and if you try to plant them now, they're going to bolt.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Or just shut down. Yeah. So now is not the time to be doing that. If you want to start seeds right now and you've got a nice shady, maybe it gets a couple hours of morning sun and then shade for the rest of the day, you can try it. It depends on your elevation. It depends on your microclimate. I've got radishes growing underneath my tomatoes right now because they don't like the heat.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is it's just focus on keeping the plants that you have right now watered and happy.
Well, yes, and actually ask yourself, when did you fertilize last?
Not me.
Did you fertilize with a dry fertilizer? Because a dry fertilizer, dry amendment worked into the soil.
Yeah.
Soil temperature takes about a month to start becoming active in the soil. If you use a wet liquid fertilizer, you can almost see an uptake in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So is it time to fertilize now? Think about when you fertilized. And again, I can't express enough, please log everything. Oh my gosh. I'm the worst person in the world for it.
I know it makes our life so much easier, but at the time it seemed so hard. Now also spraying our trees. We don't, because I know most of the trees need 3 times a year, right?
That's in the dormant season.
Okay, so not anything now. So we really just have to focus on watering, fertilizing, pruning, that kind of stuff. Just maintenance, enjoying our gardens right now.
Yes, and you mentioned, go get a new chair, or I just painted an old one and I brought it up to set in an area that I like to watch, where I can really watch the birds from. Now you can also, it's time to start doing maintenance on your fruit trees. If you didn't put out traps for the, oh my gosh, my brain just died. The worm that gets into your apples. You should have those out. Those should have gone out at first bud break. Now's not the time to spray because anything you spray is going to go on your fruit.
Right.
One of the downsides of belonging to this Northern California backyard garden, they're already harvesting their peaches and they're apricots, and they're showing these baskets of all this fruit. And I'm like, oh, my pears are about that big.
We don't have any fruit trees anymore. It just didn't work for us. We don't
I
have
have
we don't have a big enough property.
I have
But
a fig, a pear, and a peach. And sometimes I get peaches. Usually we'll have a early freeze and it'll kill it. I was surprised that the hail we got didn't knock all the buds off, but I've got it looks like I'm going to get a pretty good supply. Oh, and I've got a couple of Meyer lemon.
oh, no.
And they're, oh my gosh, one of them is just like, ah,
Oh, yay.
yay, I'll share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
wonderful.
yeah.
Well, gosh, that was a very informative episode. I learned a
Well,
ton.
thank you, my dear.
And,
Thank you, my dear.
yeah, so we there's lots we can talk about. Like I said, that we can talk about mushrooms and
Let me dig into
all
that.
kinds of stuff.
Let me dig into that, and I'll see if I can pull us up a mycelium expert.
Okay, and hopefully there's some viewers out there that aren't afraid to come on our show with us.
Yes, please.
But that's okay. They can continue to send in their questions or whatnot.
Yes, please do.
All right.
Please
Well,
do.
you take care of yourself.
You too.
Enjoy your garden. Stay cool.
You too. Be safe.
All right.
Bye-bye.